Is the EcoDiesel the best engine you can get in the Ram 1500? Is it the right engine for you? Those are the two questions we're going to be focusing on in this video. If you want to know more about the rest of the Ram 1500 lineup, I have a number of other videos that you can check out. This one is going to focus almost entirely on this 3-liter EcoDiesel under the hood. The first thing to know about the diesel engine option in the half-ton Ram is that you can get this in essentially every trim level of the Ram 1500. That's a little bit different than the competition, where you cannot get the diesel engine in the absolute base trims. But if you want a tradesman Ram 1500 with no options, vinyl seats, etc., and a diesel engine, Ram will sell you one of those. And likewise, if you want the diesel engine in one of the very top-end trims, like this Laramie Longhorn Edition, then you can get the diesel engine in this one as well. And this is where you're going to find things like the full LED headlamps in this particular model, radar adaptive cruise control, all the shiny chrome going on up front. The next thing you need to know is that if you want a Ram 1500 with 2 doors and an 8-foot bed out back, then you're going to be buying the older generation of Ram 1500. That's because Ram rolled out the 1500 redesign in kind of an unusual way. They decided to redesign the 2 4-door cabs first, which is what we see here. This is the larger of the 2 cabs, and then 2 bed sizes in the back as well to go with it. However, they did not redesign yet the 2-door long bed version. We saw something very similar when GM launched the new Sierra and the new Silverado, but Ram is going on a slightly longer time frame, so we don't know exactly when this generation Ram 1500 is going to get the 2-door long bed version, or if it ever really will. At the moment, you will still be able to buy the older generation of the Ram 1500 if you really want 2 doors up front and the 8-foot bed in the back. Unfortunately, oddly enough, that is not a terribly common combination for pickup truck shoppers in America anymore. In the half-ton segment, the vast majority of pickup truck shoppers are getting 4 doors up front. Moving to the rear, Ram decided not to change the look for the EcoDiesel model, so we still get twin exhausts down there at the bottom of the bumper and no diesel badging on the back end of this trim. Now let's dive under the hood and talk about the engine itself. This is the 3rd generation of FCA's EcoDiesel 3-liter turbocharged V6 engine. The very first generation EcoDiesel came about in a very strange way. VM Motori was not owned by FCA at that time. Cadillac needed a diesel engine for one of their European market sedans, so VM Motori built them a 3-liter turbo diesel V6. Unfortunately, GM decided they couldn't really afford it. They never ended up using that engine, and it just sat on a shelf. Then along came FCA, who started buying up shares of VM Motori, ultimately owning the entire company. They found the 3-liter V6 engine on the shelf, and they jammed it under the very first EcoDiesel products from FCA. But this is now a 3rd generation EcoDiesel model, and at this point in time, it shares almost no components with the 1st generation and very, very few with the 2nd generation 3-liter EcoDiesel. Over the generations, they've tweaked the EcoDiesel to improve overall refinement, overall efficiency, and of course, cost of operation as well. They've also significantly improved overall horsepower and torque. 260 horsepower now, 480 pound-feet of torque. That's a 70 pound-foot of torque bump over the 5.7-liter V8 that's also available under this hood, and all 480 pound-feet of torque are available at very, very low RPMs, right around 1600 RPM. And they stay strong well up into about 2500 or so RPM, and this will still be making more torque than the 5.7-liter V8 over a very, very broad range of RPMs. The massive amount of torque and the very broad torque curve are 2 key reasons that you might want to get this 3-liter V6 over the 5.7, but one of the other reasons is fuel economy. This averages 24 miles per gallon when equipped with the 4-wheel drive system as we're driving right here, versus 17 for the 5.7-liter V8. Ram's first half-ton diesel pickup truck proved to be so popular that General Motors and Ford decided to hop on the bandwagon. But this Ram 1500 still has a higher tow rating, 12,560 pounds when properly equipped, which would of course be rear-wheel drive, not 4-wheel drive, and the shorter cab up front. That tow rating is nearly 1,000 pounds higher than the base 5.7-liter V8 in the Ram 1500. It tops out at 11,610. But if you check the option box for the mild hybrid system, then you can get the V8 to tow up to 12,750. Payload can be a tricky thing to talk about when it comes to pickup trucks because so many things affect payload. It's not just the engine that you choose and whether you get 4-wheel drive or 2-wheel drive, the rear axle ratios that you choose, which are incidentally the same as the 5.7-liter V8s, but also the options that you select on the truck, which trim level you get, whether you get the sunroof, do you get the air suspension, are you getting the Ram boxes in the rear? All of those will affect the overall payload. This particular truck right here came in at 1,500 pounds of payload overall, but if you check all the right option boxes, or really don't check those option boxes, you could max out at 2,040 pounds in the diesel. What surprised me about that number is that payload ratings in the diesel are actually about 100 pounds better than the 5.7-liter V8. Of course, if you want the most payload in your Ram 1500, you're going to have to get the base gasoline V6 engine. And that's essentially the same thing that we see in the competition. Since payload is a function of all the other things that are going on in the truck, the lightest engine is going to give you the best payload, and that's generally going to be the absolute base V6 engine. Since fuel economy and towing are the two big reasons to get the diesel engine under this hood, let's talk about fuel economy first by going on a road trip. Nothing's a better test for highway fuel economy in this Ram pickup truck than taking this for Thanksgiving dinner. So we have 102 miles left to go, 204 miles round trip, assuming we don't do any driving around at our destination. So let's take a look and see what our fuel economy is like on this long run. So far, 9 miles in, we've been averaging about 30 mpg. Now we will be going up and over 2 mountain passes on our way there, so definitely factor that in when we talk about our fuel economy here in a moment. We now have our first mountain pass under our belt, and our fuel economy average has dropped down from 32 miles per gallon on the flatland, relatively flatland area around the Bay Area, down to 28 mpg. Now it's going to start going back up again because we're going to be driving at around 68 miles an hour on relatively level area until we get up to the next mountain pass where I expect it to drop again. The good thing to know here is that if you're in steady state highway travel, getting over 30 miles per gallon is fairly easy in the Ram 1500 diesel. We've been keeping the cruise control set to 68, which is just barely over the speed limit here. But we are going to be driving at higher speeds because the speed limit on I-5 in California is 70 miles an hour. Just as you'd expect out of a vehicle that's more or less shaped like a brick, the modern pickup truck is just not as aerodynamic as the average passenger sedan. Fuel economy definitely drops at higher speeds. So out here in the 70 mile an hour zones in the Central Valley of California, level highway travel, cruise control set to 74, we were getting about 26 miles per gallon on average. That really hurt our overall fuel economy, and now the overall average is running at around 28 miles per gallon. We're soon going to be on a freeway here with a 65 mile an hour speed limit, and that is starting to bring our fuel economy average up. We're now on a freeway with a 65 mile an hour speed limit, and that's really started to improve our fuel economy. Now that's not too surprising. Most vehicles out there you'll see the same sort of thing going on, but it is definitely more pronounced in less aerodynamic vehicles like pickup trucks, vans, SUVs, etc. Now the other half of that road trip happened at night, and unfortunately none of my cameras really do that well filming a vehicle at night, so instead I just calculated all the numbers and we'll talk about them here. Averaging 65 miles per hour, which meant that we were going 73 or so in the 70 mile an hour zones, about 68 in the 65s, and then of course in-city driving here and there. This averaged 26.5 miles per gallon, which is 2 miles per gallon better than the EPA score. Now for the entire trip, we did have this pickup truck in its two-wheel drive mode, which is going to give you the best overall fuel economy. If we put this in the 4 auto mode, then we noticed it dropped the overall fuel economy by about 1 mile per gallon. It's not a huge loss, but definitely keep that in mind. Also keep in mind, if you want the absolute best fuel economy, that's going to be the rear-wheel drive version of this. I should also mention that at the end of the trip, I noticed that the tires were actually a little bit low. According to the window sticker, these tires should be set to 36 psi when cold. When warm, these tires were about 34 psi, so they were a little on the low side. That's mainly because we had a cold snap here in California and it was 30 degrees. These tires were probably filled up when it was closer to 70 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's one of the reasons that fuel economy could have been a little bit higher if I'd really paid attention to that. I suspect that if these tires had been inflated according to the window sticker, then this vehicle would have had a slight improvement on that particular trip. With that out of the way, it's time to talk about towing. Modern pickup trucks with their millions of different camera views make backing up to your trailer single-handedly an awful lot easier than it ever was before. And this has a sort of bird's eye over the trailer hitch view, so that way it's a little bit easier to back things up. Hopefully I can get this in almost one try here. I don't have anybody with me, unfortunately, today. We're pretty close. Ooh, right there. That seems about right. So we'll go ahead and put it in park, engage the electric parking brake. And now, since we're going to be carrying a decent amount of weight, it's time to connect the weight distributing bars. Remember that when you're carrying heavier weights, you should not only be looking at trailer brakes, but you should also be using a weight distributing hitch. Even in trucks that have a rear air suspension, even in pickup trucks like this, weight distributing suspensions are always going to give you optimum handling because they're going to help distribute the load between the front and the rear axle. And since this truck has an integrated trailer brake controller, a feature that I highly recommend anybody that buys a brand new pickup truck should get, I'm going to bypass my wireless trailer brake controller that's integrated into the trailer and just plug the 7-pin harness right in here. When it comes to towing, remember again that the options that you put on your vehicle, two-wheel drive, four-wheel drive, Ram boxes, all the other things, different trim levels, those will all affect your overall tow rating and of course the payload rating as well. By my estimate, this particular truck should be right around 10,000 pounds of actual towing ability. I have connected right here a 20-foot heavy equipment trailer. This trailer weighs almost 3,700 pounds by itself, and then we're gonna put something on it. I thought about this all-new Audi Q3, but I decided that I better not strap someone else's car to my trailer while towing it with someone else's car. I thought about hitching up my excavator because this weighs about 4,000 pounds without fluids and without attachments, but honestly, this is a bear to try and strap down to a trailer. Someone else is driving my Durango today, so clearly the best option is going to be this 2000 Grand Cherokee right here. This weighs 4,200 pounds as it is right here. We've verified that on scales before. The stock one was around 4,150 pounds. The lift kit and everything else that we've done to this particular Jeep has increased the weight a little bit. The Jeep and the trailer together bring us to around 7,700 to 7,800 pounds, so it's clearly time to add more weight. And that's where this four-wheel drive electric wheelbarrow and this big pile of granite rocks comes in. This gives us about 1,500 pounds of extra weight. Hopefully this electric wheelbarrow can actually wheel it all the way over there. Rather unfortunately, my electric wheelbarrow can't make it up this incline, so instead, it's just time to shift the rock to the inside of the Jeep very clearly. Now with everything loaded on board, it's time to drop the hydraulics. And bang. We have a Jeep in place. Next step, of course, is to properly strap the load down. So time to dive into the bin of toys. At the moment, I have an estimated 9,100 pounds on this truck, and so it's a good idea to start our talk about this diesel engine going downhill. So I've hopped on California State Highway 17, and we're gonna see what kind of engine braking we can get out of this 3-liter engine. Engine braking is a function of displacement, largely, also the compression ratio in the engine, the gear ratios involved, etc. And so all things being equal, a smaller displacement engine is not going to give us as much engine braking as a larger displacement engine. That is an important thing to keep in mind. And we're definitely seeing that as I start to descend this hill. I have the transmission set to 3rd gear. It's almost at redline, just over 4,400 RPM or so, and we're still accelerating down the hill. If I were to put this same trailer with this same weight on a Ram 1500 pickup truck or a Dodge Durango or anything out there with that 5.7 liter Hemi V8, it definitely is capable of slowing the trailer down. In fact, actually the transmission has just given up and it's now upshifted to 4th gear to prevent engine over revving. That means that versus the 5.7 liter V8 in the Ram 1500, you're certainly going to be relying more on the vehicle's friction brakes or the trailer brakes to help keep you slowed down. And that's definitely going to be a big factor for anyone that lives in a mountainous area. For instance, I am commonly towing 7,000 pounds or so up and over this same 2,200 foot mountain pass. And in my Dodge Durango, which uses the same 5.7 liter V8 that's available in the Ram 1500, I can very easily keep a downhill speed of 45 or 50 miles an hour. Absolutely no problem. I really wish that Ram had put an exhaust brake on this diesel engine. It really would have improved the engine braking going downhill. And interestingly enough, that's a feature that we only see in the Chevy Silverado and GMC Sierra with their available inline-6 engine. That was the only engine in this segment whose origins dates back to a pickup truck directly. GM developed that engine exclusively for their pickup trucks, and that's likely why we see that feature. Again, this engine's history dates back to more passenger-oriented vehicles, but it's been adapted for pickup trucks, and we see the exact same thing in the F-150 diesel. It was also originally designed for passenger vehicles, mainly Land Rovers and Jaguars. So if you live in a mountainous area and you're frequently going up and down mountain passes with heavy loads in the back, keep in mind that you will get much better engine braking out of either the 5.7 liter V8 or something like that Silverado or Sierra. Now that said, the Ram 1500 has pretty decent brakes. That's one of the reasons you might want to tow with a Ram 1500 or your average pickup truck out there over the average SUV or crossover. We're going to have bigger brakes that's going to give us better stopping power. With downhill out of the way, now it's time to turn around and head back up the hill. 0 to 60 acceleration out of this diesel engine is definitely slower than the 5.7 liter V8. In our tests, 0 to 60 happened in 8.1 seconds. Remember, that is going to depend on the options that you check, the overall weight of the vehicle, whether you get 2-wheel drive, 4-wheel drive, and of course which axle ratio you get. As far as the engine lineup in the Ram 1500 goes, this is the slowest engine option available. This is slower not only than the 5.7-liter Hemi, but also the 3.6-liter gasoline V6. But when it comes to pulling heavier loads up steeper grades like this, the diesel has an excellent feel to it. It's all thanks to that very low end torque that we get there. So this can hang out in higher gear ratios than the 5.7-liter V8 can, and you can maintain that speed up the hill. However, if you're trying to accelerate with the load attached to the back, then oddly enough, the 5.7-liter V8 is a little bit better than this diesel. One of the areas where Ram has done very well, not just in this generation of their pickup truck, but also the previous generation, is overall driving refinement for an American half-ton truck. And that continues for this generation of the Ram, including in the EcoDiesel model. This simply has a better and more SUV-like ride than something like the Silverado, the Sierra, or the F-150. It's worth noting that for 2020, GM has updated the suspension design in the Silverado and in the Sierra to help improve overall ride quality, and the difference is definitely noticeable. It puts it a little bit closer to the Ram, but I still think this Ram has the best ride overall out there. It also has some of the best handling scores when you comparably equip this to the competition. In situations like this where traffic is attempting to pass these two trucks on this mountain pass, you'll definitely notice that the throttle input is a little bit lazier with this diesel than it is with the Chevy Silverado diesel or the Ford F-150 diesel, and also a little bit lazier than the 5.7-liter V8. But it's not too far off of what we see in the 3/4 ton and 1 ton Rams with their Cummins turbo diesel engine. So I think it's pretty clear that Ram was trying to emulate the overall throttle feel that we see in the larger Ram pickup trucks in this smaller one. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, because you can dig into the throttle and then get the power that you need. While we're out here on the road, let's talk about the active safety systems. The Ram 1500 is available with their full suite of safety systems, including lane keeping assistance, autonomous braking, all that sort of stuff. And one really nice touch is that Ram puts the radar module for the adaptive cruise control and the autonomous braking right up here behind the rear view mirror. That means that if you were to put a brush guard or some other modification on the front of your Ram 1500, you're not going to have to worry about interfering with that radar sensor behavior. That's a really nice touch that I appreciate. The other thing that I really like is that this vehicle's blind spot monitoring system is trailer aware. I have the trailer connected, the vehicle knows that, and right here on the instrument cluster it tells me that it thinks the trailer is 30 feet long. Now, the trailer is really only about 26 or 27 feet long, but if it wants to overestimate, I'm totally fine with that. And it will tell me not only what is in this vehicle's blind spot, but what's also in the trailer's blind spot when I'm out on the highway. That is a really, really handy feature. Now, unfortunately, there are a few features that we get in the competition that we don't see in the Ram 1500. Some features I don't really miss, like I don't need the automated trailer backup feature in the Ford F-150. I think that if you can't back up your trailer, you probably shouldn't be driving a trailer, especially in a city environment, because you definitely need to learn how to drive your trailer. But I do appreciate the fact that in the Chevy Silverado and the Sierra, you can get tire pressure monitoring for your trailer back there. And my trailer has a separate tire pressure monitoring system because I'm one of those people that really wants to know my tire pressure at all times. And so I have to have a separate module for that. We don't find that in the Ram 1500. Oddly enough, we do find it in the 3/4 ton and 1 ton Rams, just hasn't migrated itself down here to this model. The other thing worth mentioning is the camera setup that we find in GM's pickup trucks. Now, if I click the backup camera button on this vehicle, I can see the status of my hitch back there. I can make sure the wires aren't tangled or anything like that, and I can see the front of the trailer. It actually gives me some useful information that I wish I could see all the time, but this automatically turns itself off after about 10 or 15 seconds. In the Silverado and in the Sierra, you have the availability of 2 extra digital inputs. So you have all the cameras connected to the vehicle, which really make trailering easy, the same setup that we have basically on this vehicle. But then we have an additional 2 inputs, so you can put a camera on the back of your trailer and see what's behind you. You can display that on the screen at all times. And you can even put a camera on the inside of your trailer, so if you're carrying around horses or valuable equipment, you can see what's going on back there in the trailer. So you can make sure that if your horse has fallen over or something like that, that you know to stop right away. Now, I wouldn't say those camera systems are deal breakers for me for the Ram 1500, because I think that the General Motors systems, although they're unquestionably helpful, do need a little bit more refinement. I wish that they had tweaked some of those camera views a little bit better. Hopefully that's coming in the future, but at the moment, General Motors definitely has an edge on this when it comes to the overall camera systems. Coming back to the Ram 1500, another feature that I really like is the fact that this radar adaptive cruise control and the autonomous emergency braking system are both trailer brake interactive. So if this vehicle feels like it needs to emergency stop, or if you're just driving out on very long highway stretches, you can use the radar adaptive cruise control. It'll actuate the trailer brakes as it slows you down. And if you're panic stopping, it'll obviously actuate those as well when the automated system has decided it needs to do that. One thing that I didn't expect was for this cabin to be a little bit louder than the Ram 1500 with the V8. This is 69 decibels in our tests at 50 miles an hour, putting it 1 decibel ahead of the Ram 1500 5.7. The most likely reason for that is that we don't have the active tuned mass modules on this vehicle that we do see in the 5.7 liter V8 equipped Ram 1500. You can think of those sort of like electric active shake weights. They make oscillations on the frame to counteract the oscillations coming from the engine, and it does end up reducing the sound a little bit as well. And that definitely makes that vehicle a little bit more civilized than this diesel, but if you're after that diesel exhaust note, then you're definitely going to get that in this cabin. And I don't think the diesel exhaust note is at all objectionable. Now it's time to talk about fuel economy again, but this time trailer towing fuel economy. We saw a significant improvement over the 5.7 liter V8 in regular driving situations with this EcoDiesel. Again, about 26 miles per gallon versus 17 to 18 in the 5.7 liter Ram 1500. With this 9,000-pound trailer on the back, I've been seeing a relatively similar fuel economy improvement. Going up and down this mountain pass, it was a 25-mile round trip. We've been averaging about 13 mpg. Now that may not sound all that great, but replicating this exact same test in the Ram 1500 with the 5.7 liter V8, we averaged 8.5 miles per gallon. 4.5 mpg may not sound like a great deal, but when we're talking about going from single digits on up to 13 miles per gallon, that really is a pretty big fuel economy difference if you're doing a great deal of towing. In fact, you might want to think of it this way. With that 9,000-pound trailer on the back, this vehicle gets 50% better fuel economy than we get in the Ram 1500 with the 5.7 liter Hemi. Over a week of mixed driving, we've been averaging just over 24 mpg in this particular model until we started towing. And in our longer distance road trip test, we were averaging about 26 to 26.5 mpg overall because of the mountain passes involved. I did make one mistake in that particular section. There are actually 3 mountain passes that we have to go up and over to get from where I live to the Central Valley of California near Sacramento, which is where we were going, and then those same 3 mountain passes all the way back. So even with the mountain climbing involved, it was still averaging over 26 mpg. That yields you an $800 a year savings over the 5.7 liter V8. Now the 5.7 liter V8 recommends mid-grade, so that is the number I'm using for comparisons here, but the 5.7 will run safely and efficiently on regular, which is what I feed my 5.7 liter Hemi, and that will save you a little bit more money on that side, narrowing that gap a bit. But if you were to feed them mid-grade and diesel, then 66,000 miles is your break-even point, about 4.5 years for the average driver. That's not a bad return on investment. Now, I know some of you are thinking, what about the diesel exhaust fluid? Yes, that does need to be factored into things, and depending on your exact fuel costs in your area, that will change these numbers as well. But when you factor in the cost of diesel exhaust fluid, then it turns your return on investment time to about 5 years or 74,000 miles. Still within a logical range for a lot of folks out there. Now, how much does this engine cost? Well, this is almost $5,000 over the 3.6 liter V6 engine, $4,995. It's a $3,500 upgrade over the base V8 engine, and that's where it makes a little bit more sense. If you're after just the least expensive Ram 1500, or really the most efficient Ram 1500, lowest cost to operate, that would be the base V6 engine, because it gets relatively similar fuel economy to this, but it's running on regular unleaded, which is less expensive than diesel, and we don't have that diesel exhaust fluid to consider. For that extra $3,500, we get the higher payload rating and the higher tow rating in this than the comparable model with the base 5.7 liter Hemi. Remember that the max tow in the Ram 1500 is not with the base Hemi, but with the Hemi plus the e-torque mild hybrid system. That's what gets you up to $12,750. The regular V8, it tops out at $11,610, and this tops out at $12,560. So now we have to answer the question, would I get this engine or would I get the V8? Before I got my hands on this particular truck, I thought it was going to be the 3-liter diesel that would be my top choice, but I have to say that because of where I live, I actually prefer the 5.7 liter Hemi. The big reason for that is overall engine braking ability. I live at 1,300 feet. Everything that I tow ends up going up and over a 2,200-foot mountain pass. I'm always driving in hilly or mountainous areas, and the extra engine braking we get out of the 5.7 liter Hemi is really the winner for me. Now, it is worth noting that you will get extra engine braking ability in the Silverado or the Sierra with their 3-liter inline-6 diesel because it has an exhaust brake. And again, that's one thing that I really wish this EcoDiesel would add. But there are some good reasons that you might want to get this over the 5.7 liter Hemi depending on where you live. If you live in an area where you're not climbing up over mountain passes on a regular basis, this is going to save you a significant amount of cash every year. Again, fuel savings of about $800 for the average driver out there. The more you drive, the more you'll save in this particular model. Break-even point, again, between 66 and 74,000 miles, depending on exactly how you're calculating things out. Another reason you might want to get the diesel engine is overall range. Because we have almost the same size gas tank as we find in the gasoline models, you're going to get better range because of the better fuel economy. And that's really going to pay dividends if you're doing a lot of towing, again, because 13 miles per gallon is a 50% improvement towing the same weight versus the 5.7. That's going to give you a much longer range in this when towing those heavier loads. Bottom lining, the Ram 1500 EcoDiesel proved to be a little bit trickier than I thought, because hands down, I think the Ram 1500 is the best looking entry in this segment, and we have the best interior in this segment, and this is my top pickup truck pick overall for the half-ton truck segment. But if you really want a diesel, this is not my top pick. I would actually get the Silverado or the Sierra diesel over this engine. Now, unfortunately, we don't just buy engines in America. So even though I like the Silverado and the Sierra's engine and transmission combo better than this 3-liter EcoDiesel, I would probably still buy this over the Sierra and Silverado because the exterior is more attractive to my eye and the interior is unquestionably more premium than what we see in either of those other options. So unless you really need that extra engine braking, I would get this over them. But again, for me, I would probably stick with the 5.7-liter V8. Let me know what you think about that down there in the comment section below. What would you choose if you were shopping in this segment? And does engine braking even matter to any of you at all? Let me know down there in the comment section below. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already done so, and be sure and check out all of our other videos. I'll see you later.